You step outside with your coffee. The morning is totally quiet. Cool. The kind of still that usually lasts for about 3 seconds before the chaos begins. Wings cutting the air, the hollow knock of seeds hitting plastic, those low, territorial arguments between birds who have zero patience for sharing. But this morning, none of that happens. The feeder is just hanging there, motionless. The branches around it are completely empty. The usual queue of sparrows and tits, and that one aggressive robin who acts like he owns the entire garden all gone. You scan the tree line. Nothing. And somewhere in the back of your mind, this small, kind of uncomfortable thought forms. Yesterday, you forgot to refill it. You tell yourself it's fine. They're birds, right? They'll find food somewhere else. They always do. But the silence sitting in your garden right now, it feels different from the ordinary morning quiet. It feels pointed, like an absence rather than just emptiness. And here's what's actually happening. And it's a lot stranger than you think. We've always framed bird feeders as a gift, a generous little gesture toward nature. Like a drive-through restaurant we set up in our garden out of the kindness of our hearts, and the birds just happen to use it when nothing better is available. But that framing is almost completely wrong. The moment you put up a feeder and stocked it consistently, even if it was just for a few weeks, you didn't install a convenience. You inserted yourself right into a survival system. Your garden basically became a high-yield geographic asset. It was logged, mapped, and completely factored into the daily energy calculations of every single bird within range. Now, flip this around for a second. From the bird's perspective, you are not a generous stranger. You are a geographic feature, a reliable food coordinate, just like a river or a berry bush or a particular corner of a field that always holds insects after it rains. The feeder didn't just supplement their world, it completely restructured it. Territories were redrawn around it. Flight paths were adjusted. Entire mornings were reorganized. Which means when the food suddenly disappears, it isn't just an inconvenience. It's a map that suddenly has a missing landmark. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Birds don't just happen to show up at your feeder by accident. It's not like they're just circling the neighborhood every morning hoping to find something. What they're actually doing is way more precise and, honestly, a little unsettling. They've clocked you, not just generally either, I mean specifically. Research into how birds act in the city shows that garden birds map out our human habits with a level of detail that most of us would find genuinely uncomfortable. They know exactly when your bedroom blinds go up. They know the specific sound of your back door, how it's different from the front door, or even how it sounds different in the summer when the wood expands. They recognize the specific rustle of you putting on your shoes versus just sitting back down at the table. And they don't need months to learn this. They've got it down in weeks, sometimes even days. There are actually documented cases where birds, especially crows and robins, start anticipating the feeder 3 or 4 minutes before you even step outside. They're just picking up on behavioral cues through your windows. So, when do you break that pattern? When the blinds go up and the door opens, but the feeder stays empty. They notice. And it's not that they're confused, it's more like an alert attention. Something in the sequence is wrong. And in their world, wrong means a potential threat or a big change. Either way, they have to stop and reassess everything. Just think about that for a second. You probably assume that to the birds in your garden, you're just interchangeable. Like you're just some generic, slow-moving human in the background, the thing that fills the bucket. But you're not. Bird facial recognition is a real thing. It's been documented and proven over and over. The most famous studies are on crows, how they can recognize individual faces, remember which ones were mean to them, and then literally tell other crows about it. But that same brain architecture exists in dozens of species. Robins, sparrows, blue tits, they can all tell one human face from another at close range. That means the birds in your garden actually know your face, specifically yours. And here's the part nobody really talks about. When the food stops, it's not just the resource that changes. It's their assessment of you. Before, you were reliable, predictable, safe. You were a positive association in a world where most big animals are dangerous. Now you're a question mark. You can actually see this happen if you know what to look for. Take a bird that used to feed a meter away from you without a care in the world. After 3 or 4 days without food, that same bird will start keeping its distance. It'll pause longer. It'll watch you for a few extra seconds before it commits to the branch. The relationship is shifting, quietly, without any big ceremony. You didn't just empty the feeder, you changed your status. Now, this is where their behavior becomes almost clinical. See, a bird waiting for a feeder to be refilled doesn't just sit on a branch and hope for the best. What they're actually doing, especially by the second or third days watching, really watching, actively, analytically, they're literally reading your body language right through the glass. They're tracking how fast you're moving inside the house. Whether you're passing the kitchen window heading toward the back door or away from it, they see if you're carrying something. They can even tell if your movement has that specific forward lean energy that means you're about to step outside versus the casual drift of someone just walking between rooms. Think about it. Birds have spent thousands of years reading the intent of much larger animals, predators, competitors, threats. That whole survival system doesn't just shut off just because the large animal is a human in a cardigan making toast. It runs constantly. So what you see as a bird just sitting quietly on a fence, honestly, it's a surveillance operation. They're waiting for a very specific sequence of cues: movement in the kitchen, the sound of the back door, the visual of you actually walking up to the feeder. That's what tells them if this is going to be a feeding event or just another empty morning. And the longer that sequence goes unfinished, the more that waiting shifts from patient to urgent. But here's the part nobody really tells you about what happens by day 3. Day 1, they wait. Day 2, they start looking a little further out, though they still check back. But by day 3, something changes in their risk calculation. A bird's daily energy budget is incredibly tight. Every single flight costs calories. Every minute spent sitting at an empty feeder is time they aren't out foraging somewhere that might actually pay off. At a certain point, the chances of your feeder getting filled drops too low, and it just isn't rational for them to keep investing time there. So, they start auditing their alternatives, and this isn't just passive drifting around. It's a structured evaluation. They will systematically probe neighboring territories, check out competitor feeders, even ones they've been actively chased away from before, and start pressure testing social boundaries that used to be stable. Suddenly, your neighbor's feeder becomes worth fighting for. And those birds that were politely tolerating each other in your yard's neutral zone just a couple of days ago? Yeah, they aren't in a neutral zone anymore. Which brings us to something most people never really see: the invisible ecosystem that your feeder was holding together. When that feeder was full, your garden worked as what ecologists call a resource-rich neutral zone. Basically, it was a safe space. Species that would usually be fighting each other for territory, like robins and sparrows, actually tolerated each other. They didn't bother fighting because the food was so easy to get that defending it just wasn't worth the energy. But that peace, it was conditional. The second you remove the food, the treaty collapses. Suddenly, the robin starts pushing back into the corner where the dunnock used to hang out. The bigger sparrows move into the shrubs that the smaller birds used as a safe path. These invisible boundaries that were steady for months, they just start to shift. Honestly, what looks like a quiet, empty garden through your window is actually a full-blown territory dispute. The silence isn't peaceful. It's just the absence of the one thing that was keeping everyone calm. Here's what all of this really means when you step back and look at it. You probably stepped outside this morning just expecting nature. You know, a nice background feature for your life. Birds at a feeder, simple, lumberies, decorative, uncomplicated. But what's actually happening in your garden, what's been building since the very first week you put that feeder up, is a relationship. And I don't mean a metaphorical one. I mean a real, biological, high-stakes relationship between you and these wild animals. They've napped your face, they've clocked your schedule, they've read your body language, and literally bet their survival on your reliability. That is not nothing. See, the feeder isn't just a gift you're giving to nature, it's a commitment you made, maybe without even realizing it. And the birds, they took you at your word, because in their world, consistency is the only currency that actually matters. When you refill it today, things will shift back. The robin will go back to his branch, the sparrows will get back in line, the silence will finally break, and if you really pay attention, really look, you might just catch that exact moment they decide to trust you again. That moment, it's worth showing up for. So, here's what I want to know. Have you ever noticed your birds acting a bit differently after you've missed a day or two? Maybe they keep their distance, or they watch you differently through the glass. Let me know in the comments because honestly, I think what people are actually seeing out there is way more interesting than most of us realize.